spend as much time as I usually do on explaining how I got into this, so that I can spend a little bit more time on letting you listen to the tapes themselves and understand how military crypto-linguists take the human voice on tape and slow it down and transcribe it and let you hear it for yourselves. No one that I've ever heard, has ever sat through one of my presentations and listened to what we have has ever argued with me that it's a language that they're hearing. And that's what I want you guys to be able to hear tonight. I'm going to try one other thing too, because for the first time, something that me and Ron and Al decided we were going to stay away from for a long time, and that's the idea of cognates, cognatic expressions, which means these are words that we would share with the Sasquatch, at least the Sasquatches that we have here. Another thing too is I want to read through something that's been important to us. It's been well received. Something that I released up at the Oregon Sasquatch Symposium up there, and that is what we're calling the Sasquatch phonetic alphabet. And I'm going to read you a cover letter. We'll explain to you why we thought it was, or why I thought it was necessary to release this to the community. And I'm going to ask for your help in using that to document any suspected Sasquatch vocalizations or linguistic vocalizations. I've received over the last, 2.5 years now, quite a few tapes and audio files that have the whoops and the screams and things like this. But of course, that's valuable in research, but it doesn't help us in the research of language. What we're looking for is what you'll hear here. And a lot of people, when they hear it and even get recordings of it, don't recognize it for what it is. But we're looking for the chatter. Anything that sounds like it will sound like apes fighting, right? But when we put it on a transcription program and slow it down, these are morpheme streams. Morphemes, by definition, have meaning. So this is what some of the stuff I want to talk about today. All right. Briefly, I'm not a Bigfoot guy. Not until I sort of got inundated with requests to go on expeditions and come check this place out, go check this place out. And of course, because of my study, I've had to read everything I could get my hands on. So I sort of become a Bigfoot guy, but I did not start out as a Bigfoot guy. I'm a retired Navy crypto-linguist. And how it happened, my son and I were in my classroom one day, and he needed a subject for a school paper. And of course, he's thinking Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, UFOs, whatever you can get his, what 12-year-old boys are interested in. And so we were perusing the internet. And he's right in the middle of that. He says, "Dad, what do you think Sasquatches sound like?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. Let's Google it." So we did, and sure enough, it took me right straight to the BFRO, to the samurai chatter, and I played that, and I was immediately struck by what it was to me. And I played it over and over and over again. And my son finally, he smacked me and says, "Dad, what are you doing?" I said, and I knew it immediately. I said, "Stephen, that's language. It's not human, but it's a language." And so, of course, me, a philosophy professor, thinking I'd figure out all of the, secrets of the universe, and I'm hit with a tape of a creature that is obviously not human, yet it's speaking a language. And so we're walking out to the car, and he said, "Dad, it sounded like apes fighting to me." And I said, "I know it does, son, but what we have to do, we have to get our hands on those tapes so we can slow it down like Dad used to do in the Navy." And that's essentially what we ended up doing. Through some detective work, I got a hold of Ron Moorhead and Alan Berry, the two guys that made the original tapes. And they were very happy to send them to me. And the rest is sort of history. So, let me tell you, there were three things that I immediately understood when I first heard those short little clips of what then were called the Sierra sounds. One was, it was not human. Not by our current definition of human. The second thing is that it was a language. Undoubtedly, it was a language. I recognized it as a language. Okay? But, and now, you know, we talk about whales having language and even honeybees having some kind of a language. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about language by the human definition of it. And the third thing was that it could not have been faked. And I'm going to read you my actual official arguments for that here a little bit later. But what happened was I immediately started researching Bigfoot. And I bought every book I could off the internet and out of the bookstores, and I read through there because I could not believe that I was the only guy to ever recognize language on these tapes. And I was certain that in some book somewhere, somebody had noticed this. But what I found was, and I even got Meldrum's great big fat book, not one mention of language, of Bigfoot language anywhere, in any published book. And not only that, but even the possibility that Sasquatch could have language. Not one mention. And then, I discovered in one book by Dr. Krantz, the one statement that I think put it behind everybody, and I've got it here, I'm going to read it to you verbatim, okay? He said in one of his books, quote, "The tape was analyzed by some university sound specialists who determined that a human voice could not have made them." He's talking here about Dr. Curley, who Ron and Al had studied the tape years before I got involved. He said that they required a much longer vocal tract. A Sasquatch investigator later asked one of these experts if a human could imitate the sound characteristics by simply cupping his hands over his mouth. And the answer was yes. I do not know what these recordings actually represent, but given the circumstances, they do not seem to merit any further investigation. And with that, it seems that the matter was dropped as a serious subject of research. Now, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, but Dr. Krantz was wrong about that. And I don't know who the Sasquatch investigator was or the sound experts were, but it was wrong to dismiss these tapes so out of hand, without any critical examination whatsoever. So, and that happened years and years ago. So at that time, I realized that I may have been the first guy in years and years to notice this. So I thought, I'm not a Bigfoot expert, but I might be the guy that has to bring this out. And so that's what started it all. So I knew it had never been submitted to a qualified cryptolinguist, trained in the recovery techniques of vocalizations on tape. Okay, so that's what started. Anyway, when I finally met with Ron and Al in person, just as I had decided that I was the first guy ever, I started to see myself as some kind of Bigfoot whisperer. Right? And I met Ron and Al, and the first thing they said is they knew it all along. They knew that these creatures were talking to each other and were also trying to speak. They actually were slowing their vocalizations down to try to communicate with the hunters up there on that mountain. Right? And these guys were not Bigfoot guys either. These were hunters. and they had been harassed by these creatures for a series of years. And so it was just one day in 1972, that they brought Alan Berry in. He was a journalist, and he went up there for the sole purpose of proving it to be a hoax. And he's the one that captured the first tapes. A couple years later, Ron Moorhead took some equipment up there, and that's where we got the Moorhead tape. Okay. So one of the first things, one of the most important things to Ron's been at me since the very first day on this. He says, Scott, you've got to tell me what they were trying to say. What were they trying to communicate to us? Okay, and that's been his persistent plea with me. So I'm going to address that a little bit later after I let you guys hear a little bit of this. And let that go down. Well, what you might not be able to see now, and maybe I can turn it this way, you can see how I've got it on the transcription program. And hopefully you'll be able to hear it. All we've got now is the sound coming out of the computer, and of course with the rain and stuff, but let's give it a shot. First thing I'm going to do is just let it run in its raw, natural state for a while, for a few minutes, and just to let you hear what it sounds like at what we call real time. Okay, 100% real time. That was slowed down. This is real time. If any of you hear any words, you might recognize a few words there that you can hear. It sounds like apes fighting, really. It sounds very ape-like. And you can hear the cowboys, or the hunters up there saying, what they're saying at this point is, come on, Biggie, come down and get some food. They'd made a big pot of stew. You can hear, it's very light in the background, but you can hear them going, come on, they called him Biggie. There's the laugh I was telling you about. We'll go back and listen to it here in a sec. And then he starts going through a series of aggressive growls. It's a snarl that would scare the hell out of me. Now I'm just going to go back here and just that last one, just because. Hold on, I'm going to go a little further here. This is what we do. We isolate a morpheme string. That sounds like some kind of a creature fighting with another creature, right? But what we do, what we're trained to do is military cryptolinguists, we isolate what we call a morpheme stream, or a stream of syllables attached, hooked together. We isolate it like this, we put it on a loop, and we begin to slow it down little by little to where we can recover the phonemes. Okay? Phoneme is an individual sound, articulated sound, right? So, this is just a good example of what it sounds like in real time. And it sounds like one animal angry at another. But you'll see here, if you slow it down, what we can do. This just sounds like screaming, right? You can see it up there, what I'm doing, but that's 75%. That's 50%. Bananu wa nagibash. Very clear. Bananu wa nagibash. My kids got me last Christmas. My kids got together and made a T-shirt for me that said, "I speak Sasquatch." I almost wore it down here, but I wanted to be taken seriously, I guess. Of all things, Bigfoot, right? I'll tell you, an interesting development on this too is I've recently found on the internet, on Facebook of all things, the guy who trained me, who also spent a whole career in the Navy doing exactly what I did, and his name is Ralph Blessing, and I know that if anybody spent more time, what we call sitting the cans, listening and slowing down and speeding up and manipulating the human voice on tape, thousands and thousands of hours worth, and if anybody did it more than I did, it was him. So we've already got an agreement to get together, and he's going to go through all my stuff and give me a grade, I guess. Let's go back here to the beginning, and I'm going to slow various parts of it down for you. And I want you to tell me if you guys hear any, and this is the first time I've done this, but this is kind of an intimate group. If any of you hear something when we're going through here, even if it's just single words, there's one single word that I know that many of you will pick up. But I want to give you, I don't want to give it to you. I want to see if you guys can pick it up. If you have some, raise your hand and let me hear what you guys think. Okay, hold on. Let's go back to start. Let's see here. Oh, I'm still at 50% here. Now that we think is a juvenile that's squeaking. Probably wants to get to that big pot of stew. Right? Now let me go back. I'm just going to do this first. That's the first thing. And what I want to do is bring up the buried tape transcript to show you how we do it, how it turns. This is right here. And again, I don't think you can see it up here because you're really close. But this is what the transcripts look like. And what I have transcribed for that little blurb is Ramho Baruchahu. And it's answered by Vambo Huhohu. Now, as you can see here, I've got query inflection. I've got a little, it's called a transcriber's note here, QI, that's query inflection or interrogative inflection, and then DR is a direct response to that inflection. They inflect their comments, their vocalizations the same way that humans do. But let me ask you this, is there anybody here that thinks that what they're hearing here is human? It's not human. Right? So that's just to show you what I've got here. By the way, we have 75 pages of transcripts. You're only looking at the first page. We've got in total recording almost an hour and a half. with both the Berry Tape 1, Berry Tape 2, and the Moorhead tape. So you can see that it's each one of these for a regular military transcriber, for each one of these lines might take 15, 20 minutes. Sometimes if it's particularly troublesome or hard to hear, it might take an hour just for one of these. So you can see that it's a lot of work, right? And that's before you get to sit down and analyze it. All right, so let me just, what I want to do, I'm going to slow it down. Get this out of the way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to slow it down to 50%, because this is what the standard that we've come up with is that we believe that they speak at essentially twice the speed that humans do. Right? So in order for humans to understand it, the standard would be transcribing it at 50% real time. So that's what I want to play for you is 50% real time, half speed, and that will make it possible for you guys to perceive some language in there. And I just want to play a little bit, and then I'm going to ask you, was there any words in there that you guys recognized? So let's get it on 50% and let it go. Now here's an interesting one here. Let's see, 2275, that's right here. Unikuogowa. Unikuogowa. Now listen to what the response is. Now notice the query inflection there, the interrogative. Okay, it sounds like a question. Unikuogowa. Right? Now listen to the answer from what we believe is the big male. The wino. The wino. This is a response inflection, the same way humans would do it. Okay, here's one. This one, now that's a little almost too slow. I'm going to play this at real time and see if you can tell me what he's saying. Can you tell me what he's saying there? What does it sound like he's saying? Huh? No. He's definitely, he's the phonemes that are there are simply no, and it's drawn out. Okay? This is why we're now beginning to talk about cognates. And there are several cognates that we have found that seem to be some of the most important words in our language. In other words that humans use, no matter what language you speak, there are certain words in human language that we use more than anything else. No, ya, or yes for humans, right? You, me, I, and food. Food seems to be one of the most frequently spoken words in the human language, right? But certainly yes and no. Ya, yep. And I'm going to play you some of those things where he's talking, where you can hear the words food being spoken. But let's go on with this a little bit. Now, something else you'll notice, right here is a good spot to look at that. Where are we? What was that? Okay, right here. What you have here, this is another thing, another characteristic of their language is their conversational turns. That means when I stop speaking and the person I'm speaking to begins his response or her response. Here, they happen so quickly that they're almost stepping on each other in their answer. So something's going on here that's different from the way humans communicate. Right? We humans, we say something. Can you hear me back there? And it takes a moment for us. We process the information and we say, yeah, I can hear you fine. Right? And the speaker waits for a moment to accept the response back and have it register in our minds. Right? What these creatures do happens so rapidly that you can hardly tell the difference between one creature and the other. Right? Again, I'll play just a touch of this, and you can hear there are at least two creatures talking here, but it's going like this, back and forth, where sometimes they're speaking at the same time. This has been one that's gotten a lot of attention. Just slow that down for you. What's that sound like to anyone?
Is Maya in there?
Huh?
Is Maya in there? Or May?
Falipabash, never go home. Falipabash, never go home. I've had some people tell me that it sounds like never go home. Right? Now we cannot, as linguists, come out and say, oh, they're telling the hunters, if you don't watch out, you'll never go home. Right? No, we can't say that. But and that's the difficulty when we start talking about cognates. We have to be careful with cognates because it's natural for native speakers of any language, when they're hearing a tape like this that is a completely alien language, it's natural for each of us to hear snippets of our own language within it. And so we're always careful of that, and we don't make any definitive statements about it. But at the same time, there are so many of them in here that we can't ignore it. We have to address that. And that's what we've started to do just this last summer. Again, we didn't do that at first because it was hard enough getting people to accept the fact that these creatures are smart enough to have a language, that they break them out of this Gigantopithecus thing. Because with Gigantopithecus, this is what's got numerous scientists stuck on the idea that they cannot be smart enough to have a language. Right? So it was difficult to speak about language in the first place, but from that point on, to speak about them actually using language in English, this was a little bit beyond where we wanted to go at the time. Right? So. See how we're doing on time. There's a few other things I want to talk about. Yeah, we're doing all right. Let's see. I want to play that spot here. There's a spot on here where the creatures are certainly expressing emotion, which is one of the characteristics of human language. It's one of the things we do best, right? So there's all kinds of aggressive emotion. There's some on here that sounds like sadness. A lot of eyewitness accounts where we hear about language that is not understood. We hear that the language sounded like the creature was sad. But here is a spot, I want to find it, where the creature is chuckling. And we've made jokes about it, but it's almost germane. Right? The argument could be made that he's actually, one creature is making a joke and doing something very human, laughing at his own joke. Right? So, Now, and at the same time, this is what's very strange about it, and where cognates, where the argument can be made that cognates are legitimate here, is that while he's doing that, even though the humans are not saying the word laugh, right, the creatures are. Right? So, let me find it here. Okay, we got to come back to that one. No. You can hear the cat. Oh, we got to come back to that one too. Okay, first off, right here. That's real time. You can almost hear it. I laugh, and it's said twice. It's said twice within a short period of time. There it is again. Okay, here's one spot where this is another thing that is very good evidence for language here, where you have a repeated morpheme. A morpheme, again, which is a syllable, that is stated by one creature, and in the response, the same morpheme is repeated. Okay? Any example in English could work. Is that food good? The word good. Yes, it's good. So you have the same morpheme repeated both in the question and in the response. Okay? Here it is. One creature says, Befawadi, and the other creature comes back immediately and says, Befalulu. Befawadi, Befalulu. And again, it's so close together that they're hardly distinguishable. Here we go. All right, I'm going to play this in real time. You tell me what it sounds like. Here's another morpheme string that is repeated both in the address and in the response. Probably, or probably. Okay. I've got the word probably in my mind. It's not transcribed exactly like that, but I've had too many people say, that sounds like they're saying probably. 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 Oh, siklotu. Okay. That's language. Now to go back to this part here again. Slow down. Okay, a couple of things back here that I wanted to go back to address because they're just too weird. All right, let me find them here again and. Now this is one. This is one spot here that some detractors have used to say these are not Bigfoots. This is somehow humans have taken this tape and manipulated it, because this sounds so human here, even at real time, 100% real time, it sounds human. Okay? But I can tell you it's not human. What would you say the sex of that animal was, the gender? Huh? Female, yeah. Let me slow it down a little. You can see why someone would say, oh, these tapes are faked. It sounds too human. This is one of my favorite spots. Okay, oh, this is it. Here we go. Okay, I gotta find this on here because I gotta give it to you in the way I do it, and then I've got no for Kenya. Vaon siruk miro rap digo whoop, and then as if one creature is being scolded by another, right? And then what the response is, me watch food, plain food. In one morpheme string, they have the word food pronounced 2 times. Me watch food, plain food, right? And this is at a moment when the cowboys are in the background, and you can hear them. They're very quiet. You guys can't hear them. Going, Biggie, come on down, get some dinner. We got some stew down here for you. And never once, in all of the vocalizations that the humans are doing, do they use the word food. They say dinner. Come get some stew. Got some good meat down here. Never once do the hunters use the word food. Yet in one morpheme stream alone, we have the word food pronounced twice by the creature. Right? And cognatically, it's a pretty good pigeon. It's a pretty good pigeon for if you wanted to say, no, by God, I'm watching the food and there's plenty of it. Me watch food, plain food. No, wow. No, why? Right? And then a moment later, and I'll play this for you too, very cognatically, the other creature that seems to be scolding the other one says, be careful now, prosgut. Be careful now, prosgut. And this is one of the... We think we have 3 names. We think these creatures have names. We think on these tapes we have 3 names. Yes, prosgut. Prosgut is one. Pilar is another one. Pilar, which is on the Moorhead tape. Now, Pilar is a name in English. I'm not English, for humans, in Spanish, right? Pilar is a very popular name. But it's the inflection that gives us the idea that they're actually calling out a name. I'll play that for you. Okay? Okay, I want to play the food part. Now, what you're hearing there is the end of Gigo, whoop, and the other one, again, almost stepping on the other one. No, me watch food, plain food. Okay? And on here, I want to play this part where it says, be careful, be careful now, proscut. Okay, and we separate these into morphemes. We he can't, in what we call radical translation, we cannot define words. Okay, so that's why we call them morphemes. We have to transcribe them according to syllables or morphemes, right? And if several morpheme streams fit together to create what we would call a cognatic word, then we're good again. If indeed they do speak some English. Oh. Again, very human sounding. Any questions at this point for anyone? I usually had, and Jeff Meldrum had quite a bit of questions for me up in Eugene about cognates. He seemed to feel that if even Jeff Meldrum is starting to get his mind around, and that's the words he uses. I've done 3 presentations that he's sat in on, and every time he comes up to me afterwards, he says, Scott, because this is so far out of his belief system that he can't quite do it. It's almost against his religion, right? But what he has done, he's come this far. I think he's a good scientist, very good, right? The best of of what we do. And he said, it's just so. And he's honest with me. He said, Scott, it's just so. He says, what you have it's undeniable, but it's so difficult for me to get my mind around it. And that's the way he has begun to approach it, right? And up in Eugene, afterwards, he says, now cognates. And here again, I threw something else at him that I'm sure he wasn't expecting. He said, you're telling me that they speak English now? I said, well, no, we can't say that. But that's what it sounded like you were saying. But he says, well, wouldn't they have regional dialects like humans do? I mean, if the ones up in the mountains in California are speaking English, what are the ones down in Florida speaking? And I say, we would have to assume that, yes, they would have regional dialects. Would they, in order for them to maintain the same language? Because language is a living thing. Language changes with isolation and with time, right? But the thing that makes us believe that they could indeed maintain the same language is that they don't seem to be isolated. They seem to be so migratory, move around so much, that they would have contact with the next clan or the next tribe, it would seem. Why would they be speaking English? Well, why would we hear so many Spanish words? Why would we hear so many Native American words? I have Native Americans listen to this, and they pick out Native American words. Well, and would they have their own language? Yes, they would. They would have their own language, but as language happens, we influence each other's language through contact. Okay? How long has Spanish been on this continent? 500 years. How long has English been on this continent? 400 years. At least, right? Has English and Spanish displaced the Native American languages pretty much from this continent? Yeah, we have to try hard to hold on to those languages, right? Well, if these creatures are so observant, if they're able to watch us every time we step into their territory and listen to us, they know what are we talking about when we're cooking stuff on the campfire. Talking about food, right? After 400 years of observing us, our language would naturally influence them. And their vocabulary in the Native American languages would steadily decrease, and their vocabulary in Spanish and English would steadily increase. We would see this as a natural thing for them. Any questions about that? Okay. Yes?
Why do you think they speak twice the normal? I mean,
That's, we don't know.
What was the question?
That would be for a biologist to tell you.
What was the question?
Why would we think that they speak, that the prosody of their language is twice as fast as ours?
I watched a special about chimps.
Yeah?
And the chimps were looking at a TV screen, and they'd get rewarded if they could remember where symbols were flashed up in and off. So they could do it. And human children could do it better than adults, but they lose the ability as they grow up. And
Sure.
It seems like the Bigfoot are always just popping their head up and seeing things real fast. I think they process the information faster.
That's actually what I was going to say. Most primates in the trade-off are a greater mental faculty. Our depth of reasoning is far greater than, let's say, chimpanzees. We have lost the ability to process speed and process information at that speed.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. But again, that's not for me to say. That's like a biological
Well, I'm just
question.
strictly speaking about, like he was mentioning, like chimps and
Right.
humans. That's strictly what I'm speaking. Animals.
Have you heard enough of this? I'll go into my arguments now.
We process information faster than humans.
All right, here. Okay. My first argument is that the voices on these tapes are not human, at least not as we define modern humans. Okay. For myself, having listened to thousands of hours of the human voice on tape, these creatures are simply making sounds that humans cannot make. Their vocal range is far too great. Dr. Curlin showed that. Okay. Not only that, but the fact that cryptolinguists are trained to listen for that kind of stuff. All right. They produce sounds much lower and much higher than humans are capable of. The volume and resonance of many of the vocalizations they produce are beyond the ability of humans. But again, the most striking element to consider in the claim that this is not human speech, again, is the prosody of utterance, or the speed at which the articulations are delivered, right? As well as the speed at which the conversational turns take place, in which they're almost stepping on each other in their discourse. And again, we have established a standard in the transcription, which I'm going to read to you here in a moment, for that we believe that it's essentially twice as fast. That's the rate of speed. Okay, what makes it language? My second conclusion. Okay. First thing is that the articulated phonemes, that's each sound that they make, is so similar to human sounds, our own sounds, that it must be assumed that they are producing the sounds from the same apparatus that we possess. Right? Namely the tongue, the teeth, the lips, along with the entire tracheal tree, oral cavity, and nasal cavity. We have to assume that whatever creature this is, you can make a claim, well, that this is not Bigfoot. Well, if it's not Bigfoot, then it's some other alien creature. But with this evidence here, whatever alien creature it is, has the same apparatus that we do. We can't imagine it's these little guys that don't have any mouth, right? Little green man. I don't think so. Okay, I've isolated, which we'll see, 39 different phonemes that are all common to humans. Some that are extra common, or I mean extra beyond the ability of humans. Again, phonemes are combined to form morphemes, or individual units of meaning, which we commonly call syllables or minimal words, and these are found throughout the tapes, repeated in conversational terms and in combinations characteristic only of language. We find here, again, conversational turns of utterance, or what is called discourse. Okay? The only way you have discourse is if there's language. There's no other way to define it. Interrogative inflection, direct response, imperative or command inflection, expression of emotion, intimidation, negation, even ritual. These vocalizations exhibit characteristics that are conventional, automatized, arbitrary, and creative. And these are all properties of human language that only human language has. Not the language of whales or penguins or other things that might have some form of communication. But these are articulated the same way that we do. I've been asked how I know that it's not gibberish or mimicry. Maybe we should get into that. We're getting into psycholinguistics there. Basically, the idea is, in order to produce gibberish, you have to understand language. We think that chimpanzees, to us, it sounds like gibberish, but it's not really gibberish because he doesn't have an understanding that he's making gibberish. We won't go there. Besides, it can't be a chimp or an ape because chimps and other apes don't have the apparatus to articulate those phonemes the way that these creatures do. The last thing is, how do I know that it's not faked? I was trained as a naval cryptolinguist working in naval intelligence. I was trained in every form of deceptive voice communication imaginable, including slowing tape down, speeding it up, modulation of tone and pitch, playing tape backwards. It's been accused of, well, it's just humans playing tape backwards here. No, it's not. And distortion of every kind. I was trained in all of these techniques. None of that is evidence here. Okay, I was a Russian analyst, and at the time, the Soviets were the best at distorting voice, right? For tactics of deception, right? But and they were the best at what they did, using voice, manipulating voice, right? But even the Russians could not have done this, and they certainly could not have done it in 1972. I doubt that they still could do it. Okay. Essentially, right now, for anybody to claim that these vocalizations were faked, they would have to argue that a secret club comprised of several ingenious conspirators was so determined to deceive the whole scientific world that they invented their own language, modulated their vocalizations to frequencies above and below the ability of humans, climbed to the top of a mountain, which is accessed only over dangerously precipitous trails, and I can tell you that that's true now, firsthand, that they harassed a small group of well-armed hunters over a period of several weeks, in successive years, and threw in numerous cognate words and expressions to boot. With this new evidence, it's more reasonable to defend the existence of an undocumented creature than to believe in such conspiracy. Right? Now, I want to, and I'm going to bring it up here. You probably can't see it very well, but I'm going to read you these two things that I released in Eugene that have been, by the way, well received. All right, I don't have the cover letter. I'm going to read you the cover letter here because it kind of explains why I felt the need to do it. Okay, so it's from R. Scott Nelson to the Sasquatch research community. And it's in regards to the Sasquatch phonetic alphabet, or SPA, which is attached. Since I became involved in Sasquatch research a little over 2 years ago, I have received dozens of emails from around the country involving first-hand witness accounts, many containing recorded audio files of perceived Sasquatch language. Virtually all of these have included an attempt to spell out Sasquatch, quote, words using standard English. This is of little value to the language researcher, since English is notoriously non-phonetic and is subject to widely varied local dialects. Since our ultimate goal is the recovery of Sasquatch language, I have found it necessary to establish a phonetic alphabet and transcription standard based on the transcription of the Barry Moorhead tapes, by which the contrast and comparison of all future suspected language can be facilitated. To this end, as a valuable tool in the future of Sasquatch language research, I am requesting that the attached standard be published. And I'm asking you guys all this too. Okay? I have, by the way, I have hard copies of this that I'm reading to you back here. and I'm asking $1 a piece for them just to pay for the trip to the copy store, right? But and I'm asking you to disseminate this as far as you can to all you real Bigfoot researchers out there, so that we have a standard established to facilitate the study. Okay. I'm requesting that local investigators begin using this alphabet as soon as possible to accurately document any perceived Sasquatch language. This standard should not be limited to first-hand witness accounts or recordings from North America, but should be used by investigators worldwide. And by the way, they're using it now in Russia. Right. Since most languages have many of the same non-phonetic characteristics as English, the work is written in a style of a military cryptologic SOP, or standard operating procedure. It is my belief that there is nothing more important at this early stage of Sasquatch language study than to standardize the documentation of evidence. Highest regards. Okay, now I want to just read through what this is. And you can't see it up there. The Sasquatch phonetic alphabet, or SPA, will alternately be known by the more formal denomination unclassified hominid phonetic alphabet, until such time as the subject being is scientifically classified or documented, linguistic contact has been established. Quote, Sasquatch is used here as a generally accepted term for the subject being. A variation of the English Reformed phonetic alphabet is used as transcribed from the Barrymore Head tapes. The existence of the Sasquatch being is hereby assumed, since any creature must exist before his language. Any argument for the existence of Sasquatch or his language should be given outside of this standard and outside any transcription endeavor that uses this standard. Transcripts should stand on. You can see that it's written in the style of a military operating procedure, right? Transcripts should stand alone as tools for the language researcher, whereas SPA transcripts and experts should be freely used in other works to support linguistic arguments. The purpose of this standard is to standardize all future transcription of suspected Sasquatch language and to facilitate comparison of language articulations by future researchers. The ultimate goal being the recovery of Sasquatch language. Sasquatch language is spoken approximately twice as fast, and it goes into a lot of the stuff that we've talked about here already, right? That the standard will be 50% and transcription at any other speed will be noted, so on. Since this is an unknown language transcribed for the first time, the grammar and syntax of it likewise cannot be known. Therefore, to differentiate between small and capital letters is useless and misleading. Sasquatch articulations will be transcribed using capital letters. Human voices will be transcribed by the standards of the language that is spoken on each tape, right? English, Russian, etc. And it gives the reasons why. We will use an umlaut rather than a macron to avoid the confusion with the English use of the symbol. And it gives other things. Okay, first, use in first-hand witness accounts. This is one thing that I think will be very valuable to us. Okay? Even though you don't get it on tape, we've read dozens of first-hand witness accounts that say, I heard him say this. And I've received dozens of them in emails. And it sounded like he was saying this. And then there's a morphing stream and I have no way of knowing whether this is it, what dialect of English, okay, this is written in. So I don't know what the sound actually is. Okay? This alphabet is not intended to be used solely for the transcription of recorded language, but will be highly useful in accounts of Sasquatch where the witness perceived spoken language. Researchers, when documenting witness accounts, should endeavor to transcribe each Sasquatch utterance as accurately as possible using this alphabet. As a valuable aid to the language researcher, several questions should be asked of the witness to correlate with the utterances of the Sasquatch being. First one is, what was occurring at the time of each specific utterance? How many Sasquatch beings do you believe were present? How many were speaking? Did you feel that the Sasquatch beings were speaking to each other or to the witness? What do you think the being was trying to communicate? What do you feel was the emotional state? Talk about that. Okay, for each utterance. Was there interrogative inflection? Was there imperative inflection? And so on. Okay. This alphabet is expected to grow as additional verified reports of Sasquatch language are collected and analyzed, and new extra-human articulations are documented. For example, and this I had a question about when we talked to Ed last night, right? The well-documented howls, whoops, growls, screams, and whistles of the Sasquatch may someday be found to have linguistic meaning. Wood and rock knocking or tooth popping may be found to be encoded in some way. To be code for come here to me or whatever. Right? It should not be discounted that manipulated tree and limb and stick formations could be graphic expressions of Sasquatch language, much like our own runic or pictographic human writing systems. Now, since an instance auditory, we should share this. We should share this with everybody. This should not be a thing where we're trying to hold on to these things. It's for our own personal gain. We're not trying to do that. We want to get it out there for everybody to use, and that's why we're trying to do it. And I've attached to this the first 2 pages of the Berry Tape 1 transcript as an example. And here you have the phoneme key. And the compound phonemes, then the abbreviation key, and then the transcription. First 2 pages of the transcript. That is what we're calling the Sasquatch Phonetic Alphabet, or SPA, and Transcription Standard. Okay? And it's been well received. How might I say? It's hard to argue against it, really. Right? Any questions right now before I conclude?
You said that there is 75 pages, I think, already
We
done?
have 75 pages just in the transcripts.
When are y'all planning on releasing?
Huh?
When are y'all planning on releasing it?
As soon as the analysis is done. And
Okay.
we're still several months away from that.
Okay.
And he's got more audio to listen to compared to.
I do. Yes, by the way, we do have several snippets that we can use. We've got nothing that compares with what you've heard here. But every single morpheme string counts. And especially counts if it's in places other than the mountains of California. Right? So, to conclude, what are the implications of what we have discovered? For me, it's proof that Bigfoot exists. I've heard him speak his own language. And you have too here. Short of a corpse, you know, what better proof is there for the existence of any creature than to have discovered his language? There are other implications for culture and religion. This is something new we've begun to talk about. For instance, we know that it was relatively early in our own development, possibly as soon as we were able to ask the significant questions. Where do I come from? Who made all this? Right? That we began to answer those questions. That's what we call religion. Right? There are some things that happened up on the mountain this last summer that, to me, very legitimately indicate culture. Okay? So, what does that tell us about the probability of Sasquatch having religion and culture? I mean, I've been asked by numerous people, and I get asked this everywhere I go. Does this make the creatures human? And I'm simply not qualified to say. Again, that's a problem for a biologist, right? What I can state unequivocally is that the creatures on these tapes have and use language by the human definition of it. Therefore, only one conclusion can be drawn. Sasquatch is an intelligent and thinking being. And if we use the same standard to judge Sasquatch as we use to judge ourselves, he is indeed self-aware and sentient. Now, that alone does not make him human, but it separates him from the animals. And language is the defining element here. It has become my firm conviction that Bigfoot should not be captured. I don't think you can anyway. I don't think you can. But even if you could, I don't think he should be captured, or certainly not collected as a specimen. But that contact is the best and only right way to discover him to science. I don't know if footprints. How many footprints can we cast? We got thousands of them. It's not working. Science is not embracing that, really. Right? How many hair samples? Even DNA. What happens every time we take DNA? It comes up human. Right? Therefore, it's either what?
Contaminated.
It's contaminated. Right? When we know it can't all be contaminated.
Right.
It's not going to be accepted. And as far as movies, are we ever going to have anything better than the Patterson-Gimlin? Well, we don't know. This Erickson project claims to have something going on, but we'll see. But won't people still find a way of saying it's a hoax? Sure, of course. Right? In the end, I believe that documented contact is our best hope. Just as we would document the existence of any newly discovered tribal people. I believe that we have to learn to talk to them. Now, I'll answer some questions. Anybody have questions?
What computer program do you use to?
It's called Transcribe. It's called and this one was, you know, when I was in the Navy, these transcription programs were classified. Top secret. Now you can go on any, that's what the internet's done. You can go anywhere and get a transcription program. The one I use is called simply Transcribe. And it's made for musicians. But it does exactly what we used to do in the Navy for us. So, yes?
I don't mean to really get off topic of Bigfoot, but I'd like to know more about what you did in the Navy.
I'm not allowed to talk about that.
Okay. All right. Can you talk about it if you killed him?
No. No, we sat the cans for half the day, and once we graduated from that, we got to analyze.
Well, no,
and we collected voice communications from target military vehicles, platforms, and then we transcribed them and analyzed them and sent our analysis to the Pentagon and to NSA.
To either intent or something, or
we broke codes.
Okay.
We broke codes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Code breakers and stuff like that.
There you go.
Any other questions? I'll be around. Anybody wants to hear any more of it, you're certainly welcome to come up and take a look at the transcripts that we have here. And again, by the way, we've got hard copies of that Sasquatch phonetic alphabet back there. My two beautiful daughters are back there with a box full of them. So, again, I would simply just like to, if you don't want to grab one of these here today, write me an email or something so I can send it to you so we can disseminate it as far as possible. It's the only way it's going to work for us. Okay? Thank you all for having me.